Chidi lived for the hustle. As a Lagos taxi driver, survival was a daily battle against the chaos of the city, the endless blare of horns, the suffocating fumes of downforce, and the ever-watchful gaze of last-mile officials. His dreams were like the skyline he passed every day, distant, shimmering, and almost unreachable. But Chidi believed in his hustle. One day, he told himself he'd leave the streets behind. That day began like any other, hot and relentless. The sun bore down on the crowded street of Ikeja, where Chidi waited outside a bustling bank, scanning for passengers. He ran his hand through his steering wheel, sighing as he glanced at the time on his battered wristwatch. Another hour, another 200 naira ride, he thought. Then he saw the man. The man was dressed in agbada, the fabric slightly wrinkled but still commanding an air of authority. He carried a black leather briefcase, its polished surface glinting under the harsh sunlight. His face was lined with age and worry, his eyes darting around as if he were being followed. "Taxi," the man called, his voice sharp but low. "Take me to Mushin. Quickly." Chidi hesitated for a split second, instincts flaring. Something about the man felt off. But 1,000 naira. Was 1,000 naira. Without a word, he gestured for the man to get into his old car, revved the engine, and sped into the labyrinth of Lagos traffic. As they weaved through the chaos, the man's phone rang. He answered immediately, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Yes. Everything is in place. I'll deliver it tonight." His tone was calm but carried an undercurrent of urgency. Chidi caught fragments of the conversation, his curiosity piqued. He glanced at the man through the side mirror. The man's face betrayed nothing, but his grip on the briefcase was iron-tight, the veins in his hand bulging. Chidi's gaze lingered on the briefcase, his mind racing with questions. What could be so important? When they reached a dilapidated building in Mushin, the man dismounted hurriedly and handed Chidi a crisp 1,000 Nigerian naira's note. "Thank you," he muttered, disappearing into the shadows of the building. It wasn't until Chidi was halfway home that he realized the man had left the briefcase behind. At first, Chidi considered returning it. But something stopped him, curiosity. Greed. He wasn't sure. Parking his taxi outside his cramped one-room apartment, he carried the briefcase inside. His heart pounded as he set it on his rickety table. The air in the room felt heavier, the silence almost oppressive. With trembling hands, he unlatched the briefcase. The sight that greeted him left him speechless. Bundles of crisp 500 naira notes were neatly stacked, more money than he had ever seen in his life. But as he sifted through the cash, his fingers brushed against something else. Beneath the money lay a single envelope, its paper thick and rough, as if it had been handled many times. His name, Chidi Obesai, was scrawled on the front in bold, uneven handwriting. His throat tightened as he opened the envelope, his hands trembling. Inside was a note, written in the same jagged script. "You were chosen." A sharp knock at his door made him freeze. His heart pounded as he stared at the briefcase. Nobody ever visited him at this hour. Slowly, he crept to the window and peered outside, but the narrow street was empty, cloaked in the faint glow of flickering streetlights. The knock came again, louder this time, as though someone, or something, was demanding entry. Chidi backed away from the door, clutching the note. The room seemed darker now, the shadows on the walls twisting and writhing like living things. He slammed the briefcase shut and shoved it under his bed, his mind racing. The knock stopped as suddenly as it had started. For the rest of the night, Chidi sat on his thin mattress, his back pressed against the wall, staring at the briefcase under his bed. Sleep refused to come. Every creak of the wooden floor, every gust of wind rattling the loose window panes felt like a warning. But morning eventually broke, and with it came a fragile sense of calm. Determined to put the incident behind him, Chidi made a decision. He would keep the money, burn the note, and throw the rest of the contents into the landfill outside the city. After all, he reasoned, the man had abandoned the briefcase. Whatever strange game this was, he wasn't going to let fear cheat him out of a fortune. At the landfill, Chidi hauled the remaining items, the clay pot, the blackened candles, and the now crumpled envelope, onto a heap of rotten trash. The clay pot shattered on impact, spilling its thick, viscous contents. A putrid smell filled the air, so overpowering it made Chidi gag. As he turned to leave, he swore he heard faint whispers rising from the heap, as if the discarded items had voices of their own. He didn't look back. With the money, Chidi's life transformed. He rented a shop on a bustling street in Ikeja and stocked it with brand new electronics, televisions, sound systems, and smartphones. Business boomed, and within months, he became a local success story. People marveled at his rapid rise, hailing him as Oga Chidi. But as his wealth grew, so did the unease. At night, Chidi would lie awake in his now furnished apartment, hearing strange noises, soft footsteps pacing outside his door, low murmurs that seemed to drift through the walls. Sometimes, he would wake in a cold sweat, convinced that someone had been standing at the foot of his bed, watching him. The final straw came one evening when he was locking up his shop. A gust of wind blew through, knocking over a display shelf. As he bent to pick up the scattered items, the lights flickered. In the glass of a TV screen, he saw a figure, a man in agbada, standing just behind him. Chidi spun around, but the shop was empty. Panic gripped him. He rushed to a nearby church, seeking the counsel of a pastor. The man of God listened intently as Chidi recounted his ordeal, his hands gripping the arms of his chair tightly. "My son," the pastor said, his voice grave, "you have meddled with forces beyond your understanding. That man who left the briefcase was no ordinary person. The money you've taken is cursed, it binds you to a covenant you do not understand. You must return what is not yours and seek deliverance." But Chidi couldn't let go of his newfound wealth. He convinced himself that the pastor was being overly dramatic. He had worked hard to build his business. The money was his now, he deserved it. That night, the storm came. Thunder growled across the Lagos skyline, and lightning carved jagged lines through the darkness. Chidi sat in his apartment, the shadows on the walls seeming darker, deeper. The flickering bulb overhead cast a sickly yellow light that only made the room feel smaller. Then he heard it, a soft knock at the door. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Chidi froze. The knock came again, louder this time, reverberating through the room. His throat tightened as he crept toward the door, his hand trembling as it reached for the handle. "Who is it?" he croaked, his voice barely above a whisper. No answer. Just another knock. Summoning every ounce of courage, Chidi flung the door open. The hallway was empty. Rain poured in sheets outside, soaking the threshold. But as Chidi stepped back, his eyes caught something, a trail of wet footprints leading into his apartment. His blood ran cold. The door slammed shut on its own, and the room was plunged into darkness. A deep, guttural laugh filled the air, sending chills down Chidi's spine. When the lights flickered back on, the man in agbada was standing in the corner, his face obscured by shadows. "You've taken what wasn't yours, Chidi," the man said, his voice calm but filled with a sinister edge. Chidi stumbled back, his legs giving out beneath him. I didn't know," he stammered. "Please, I returned the money." The man stepped forward, his agbada billowing as if moved by an unseen wind. "It's not about the money," he said. "It was never about the money." He opened the briefcase he held in his hand. This time, it wasn't filled with cash. A pulsating red light poured out, bathing the room in an eerie glow. The air grew thick, making it hard for Chidi to breathe. He clawed at his throat, gasping for air as the light consumed everything around him. The next morning, Chidi's shop was found abandoned. Neighbors whispered of ghostly screams and strange red lights that had filled the night. His apartment was empty, save for a single note left on the rickety table. Debt paid. As for the man in Agboda, they say he still roams the streets of Lagos, his briefcase in hand, searching for the next soul to claim.